Well, you can't really discuss the environment and pollution without dealing with the car. And those of you remember that vignette that I read from yesterday, the Eagleman vignette where he sums up a life but redistributes the events, you remember? So many and so many hours spent clipping your nails, so many and so many hours in the shower. Well, it's shocking to learn, and you will in this book by Taras Grescoe, that the average North American spends 9 years in their car over the course of a lifetime. That's pretty shocking, and typically in unpleasant circumstances where they're not really doing anything very valuable, and they're neither making money nor making love. So, that'd be a bit of a... The other thing that Taras does in this book is he does a little review of various cities in the world and how they fare with this never-ending problem of traffic. And he deals with 3 Canadian cities, the 3 biggest ones, Montreal, where he lives now, Vancouver. Both of them get away pretty well in his analysis, but he calls the situation here in Toronto as nothing short of a tragedy. Taras.
Thanks, it's a pleasure to be here. I've been told that these little cue cards I've brought with me would be confiscated if I was at TED Talks in California. Fortunately, we're in Canada. I've got a terrible memory, so I'm going to be doing a bit of reading from them. I'm here to tell you today that I'm a straphanger, and I'm proud to be one. First, I better explain what a straphanger is. A straphanger is an old term. They use it in New York and Toronto and London still. And it refers to someone who relies on public transportation. These are the people you see on Hong Kong ferries, in Paris metro cars, New York subways, and they're usually standing and forced to hold a strap, often in the context of a long-suffering straphanger. I have a somewhat broader definition of the term. Here, I'm going to click too. I have a somewhat broader definition of the term. For me, being a straphanger can mean being a cyclist or a pedestrian, because in some cities, bicycles are a form of mass transit. And for me, every transit ride begins with a walk. You're walking from school, you're walking to work, you got to walk to home at the end. Being a straphanger, once again, according to my personal definition, means you don't rely on a private automobile for your day-to-day commuting. Personally, I've managed to reach my mid-40s without ever owning a car. Of course, I use cars. I even worked as a professional driver once. I delivered dentures around the lower mainland in British Columbia. Quite a glamorous job. I was downwardly mobile out of university. And I still make sure my driver's license is paid up every year, and I belong to this sort of zip car-style car share program in Montreal. We're moving furniture, that kind of thing. But for 95% of my travel, I go by foot, bicycle, bus, train, and because I live in Montreal, I use the metro. For some people, the fact that I ride transit at my age and don't own a car makes me one pathetic individual. Now, that's a quote from Salvador Dali. I've been to his castle in Catalonia, and I've seen his collection of Cadillacs. But look at this. That is Salvador Dali coming out of a metro station in what is clearly Paris. Because he's a surrealist, he's walking his pet aardvark. But still busted. Another well-known commentator set the loser bar even lower. That's a quote that's been attributed to Margaret Thatcher. And the closest I could come to finding a picture of her on a bus is this one. It's not her, of course. It's Meryl Streep. The Iron Lady would never be caught dead on a bus. As far as I'm concerned, elitist snobs like them can have their chauffeured limousines. 3 years ago, I decided to embrace the maligned identity of the straphanger for a book I was working on. I set out on a round-the-world voyage looking at the best and worst in urban and intercity transportation. And today I'm going to talk to you about what I saw and learned along the way. First, though, this is important, why do our cities need more and better public transit? Simply put, for me, private automobiles no longer work as a form of mass transit. Congestion now costs the Toronto region about $6 billion a year in wasted gas and time. People in Toronto spend 80 minutes a day getting to and from work or school or whatever, which puts Toronto dead last among 19 cities in Europe and North America. It's even worse than Los Angeles. In the United States, congestion costs the economy $115 billion a year. Gas prices have had their ups and downs lately, but in the long-term trend, it's going to be harder to get the stuff out of the ground, and the trend is going ever upwards for prices. Electric cars would be nice if half of the electricity on this continent didn't come from burning coal. And if everybody switched to leafs and volts, it would be a disaster for global warming. For me, the real issue, though, is that the future of the world is urban. Half of the global population now lives in cities, and cars just aren't going to fit. That's India, by the way. When it comes to automobiles in the city, it's a classic case of the tragedy of the commons. An incremental gain in individual freedom, owning a car, leads to a diminishing of the commons for everybody in the city. And public space is diminished too, and this is one of the most precious things that a city has to offer us. That, in short, is my argument for transit. Not that it's noble to ride it or always pleasant. It's because it's the only thing that's going to keep people moving in the cities of the future. Now, I'm no rail fan, and I'm not a train spotter, as they're sometimes called, or foamers, because they get little bits of foam on the side of their mouth because they get so enthusiastic about talking about bogies and pantographs. But I consider a train ride to be one of life's great pleasures, and I'm enough of a geek to respond to what I've come to think of as transit glamour. That was supposed to be a better font, by the way, with a sort of disco font. It faded in the transition. So without further ado, here are some of the most amazing things I saw in my travels. Modern European trams. This is the French city of Strasbourg. It's largely banished cars from its historic center while making these cheap and frequent streetcars the de facto mode of transit. I was there one Saturday afternoon, and I was amazed to see the way these trams delivered people downtown. City Hall and local merchants originally wanted to build a metro. Instead, they end up building these great low-floor streetcars. And they're nice because you can sort of roll strollers into them, wheelchairs can get into them, people can take their shopping into them. It's really easy to board. Here's another one, a similar one. A lot of French cities have them in Montpellier. Funkily designed. What these cities have done is give almost all the downtown street space to public transit, and that really makes a statement. These things are big, they rumble through the streets, and they deliver far more people, far more efficiently to downtown than cars ever could. Now for me, there's nothing more glamorous than a big city metro system. I've always loved Paris's metro. It's the one that made me fall in love with transit. And London's underground has its charms. But the one that really blew me away was Moscow's metro. Not for the trains, but for the stations. This is Komsomolskaya, which is, to me, kind of looks like Liberace's basement ballroom if it had been designed by like master propagandists. Most stations have these vast zals, that's a zal, which are kind of baronial entrance halls, which you reach by taking very fast and very long escalators, which they stole from the London Underground, by the way. The Moscow Metro was explicitly conceived as a way of elevating the everyday citizen. It's transit with a thesis, and one of the only systems that has splendor engineered right into it. And Muscovites, I discovered, really love their system. It's the only thing that really keeps on working, this old Stalinist metro when the streets above are gridlocked. Finally, for me, here's the ultimate example of transit glamour. The high-speed train. This is the maglev train that runs in Shanghai on elevated tracks from the airport. I've ridden it. It tops out at 268 miles an hour. It sort of floats over the tracks. It's close to being a jet on land. They're developing ones that go 320 miles an hour. Like the Shinkansen in Tokyo and the TGV in France, they use a hell of a lot of electricity. But they still carry people more efficiently than cars and airplanes, particularly in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. And they're great for mid-distance travel. A lot of cities in Canada, I think, would benefit from this. The Windsor to Quebec City corridor, Calgary to Edmonton. The only thing preventing this is the limited vision of our current government. We're the only G8 country that doesn't have high-speed rail. The United States has the Acela from Boston to Washington. It's incredibly popular. It's used by business people all the time. It's a great way to travel. You can get lots of work done. In my travels, I also saw a lot of examples of what I'd call bad glamour. Transit that, while it might seem cool and shiny and sexy, doesn't really respond to the needs of people in the city. Here's one example. This is Phoenix, Arizona. Phoenix recently built itself 20 miles of streetcar lines at a cost of $1.4 billion. They're Japanese-made, they're spacious, they're air-conditioned, everything you'd want from up-to-date rail transit. So why doesn't it work, and why does Strasbourg's system work? It's because Phoenix doesn't have the density to support this kind of transit. The streetcars spend most of their time sort of rumbling past surface parking lots, and because it's Phoenix, cacti and tumbleweeds. As nice as it is, it's just not suited to this kind of sprawled city. The evidence is in the ridership. In a day, they have about 40,000 riders. If you compare this to New York's Lexington line, they carry that many people in 15 minutes. Here's another example of what for me is bad transit glamour. It's the Sydney Monorail. Very cute, very fun. It kind of snakes between skyscrapers in the central business district. But it's hard to reach the stations, it's really expensive, and it's molasses slow. It goes in this one-way loop. Fortunately, Sydney kind of seems to have realized that it was a waste of money. They're tearing it down, and they're going to replace it with surface light rail. For me, these are all examples of amusement park transit. They're not much better than sort of glorified people movers like the ones they used to have in Disneyland. What a city that's really serious about keeping itself moving has to do is think hard about the kind of transit mode that best fits its urban form. An example I really like is Perugia's mini metro. Perugia is this nice little hill town in Umbria. Now, this might look like a people mover to you, but these cars actually carry about 25 people. They come every minute. They go all over the city. And Perugia was having a big problem with tourists invading every summer. So they closed the center of the city to car traffic. Only local residents were allowed. And they developed this system. It works really well. It's not just a one-way thing. It goes all over the city. It's cheap, it's effective, and it works very well for the kind of town it's serving. They come about every minute, the cars, and they go relatively quickly. Another example is the mid-levels escalators in Hong Kong. Fantastic system. They go, I believe they go down in the morning, up in the afternoon. For a Canadian, they blow my mind because they're outdoors, they operate all year round. The only time they don't work is during typhoons. So I'm showing you to emphasize that transit isn't always about subways or light rail. It's about mobility. But mobility has to be matched with artistry and imagination to the city you're bringing it to. If you're looking for bang for your transportation buck, sometimes the monorail doesn't work. Not everybody lives in an Umbrian hill town. 80% of the metropolitan areas in North America look more like this. You'll notice all the cul-de-sacs, the loops and lollipops, as they call them. Buses have a terrible time trying to penetrate this kind of sprawl. Some people are optimistic about this kind of thing being repurposed and density gradually being introduced. I'm not so optimistic. But some cities have been grappling with the problems. And in my travels, one of the cities that did it best was Bogota in Colombia. They introduced this bus rapid transit system. Bogota is a fairly spread out city, and this operates like a subway on the street. You pay before you board. You just stroll into them like they're escalators. 5 or 6 buses can pull up to one of these stations at once. And the nice thing about it is they spread into the suburbs using feeder buses. And that's one thing that Toronto, believe it or not, does very well. In spite of all that Mayor Rob Ford has done to tarnish the image of transit in the city, transit scholars consider Toronto a great town for the way it serves its suburbs with feeder buses that extend from the subway. It takes a lot of money to build transit, but it takes a lot more money to build roads. And this is a quote that should have ended by loosening your belt. It's from the great Lewis, I don't know what happened there. It's from the great Lewis Mumford, who was a huge critic of the private automobile. I don't think cars are going to go away anytime soon. They're very useful machines, but there's already a lot of evidence that car use is declining, especially among the young. About half of American teenagers now say they'd rather have internet access than own a car. Personally, I see car use cities on our continent going the way it's gone in Japan and Northern Europe. In those places, people might own cars, but they use them for jaunts to the country, picking up furniture, or trips to the in-laws, rather than day-to-day commuting. Perhaps the easiest thing that a city can do to change its relationship that people have to the street is do things like they've done in Colombia with the ciclovia, where they close 100 miles of the street to traffic every Sunday on major holidays. It's people in Colombia say this has really made them see the streets as places where lovers can stroll, where families can play, where kids can play. This is the Stroll in Copenhagen. It's been pedestrianized. Times Square in New York has been pedestrianized. The people who do this say that people just pour into the streets when this space is made available. It's a wonderful situation. And before cars dominated the streets, streets were places for kids to play. They were places where life was lived. And we've gotten a lot away from that because we've turned them into thoroughfares for cars. I'm going to have to rush through the last couple of my slides. This is the kind of vehicle that I discovered in my travels that I would like to own. It is a Copenhagen cargo bike. 36% of the population of Copenhagen gets to work by bicycle. It's amazing. It's a cold city. It's a wet city. But nonetheless, they've made the bikes a form of transit. And this is a cargo bike that allows you to carry up to 3 children, a week's worth of groceries. They've got a fantastic bike infrastructure that allows people to use them. And if I have time, and I think I just do, I want to talk about the one vehicle that I encountered in my whole trip that made me really think about transportation and the idea of slow transport. This is the Karroum Machine. This machine was devised to cover a distance of 1,080 kilometers, which was the land speed record in the early 70s per hour. This machine is designed to cover that distance in 36 million years. It works with oil in the tubes. The oil makes the things move forward, the feet move forward. And the neat thing is it's supposed to be maintained by succeeding generation of tribes people who might encounter it. It's currently creeping across the floor of a gallery in London, England. All of this, for me, is one big lesson. And the lesson, if I can get to it, is when we think about transportation in the city, maybe the biggest question we should be asking ourselves is, why aren't we building ourselves streets and neighborhoods and cities that we want to linger in rather than escape from?
Thank you, Paul.